Most people imagine the Old West as a place where the biggest danger was getting into a gunfight with an outlaw. But in real life, that was only part of the story. The truth is, the Wild West was dangerous in ways that were a lot more ordinary and a lot more deadly. Dirty water, disease, bad weather, animal accidents, and basic medical problems could kill people long before any lawman or outlaw ever showed up. Life on the frontier was harsh, unpredictable, and full of risks that could turn serious fast. In this video, we're going through 8 deadly dangers of the Old West that could have ended your life much faster than most movies make it seem. And the first one was something people needed every single day, but couldn't always trust. Number 1. Dirty water. In the Old West, the thing most likely to kill you fast was not an outlaw standing in the street. It was water. On the overland trails and around rough frontier camps, safe drinking water was never guaranteed. Human waste, animal waste, garbage, and even dead animals could end up close to the same streams and ponds people drank from. That made diseases like cholera, dysentery, and typhoid a constant threat. Cholera was especially feared because it could move through a wagon train or a town with shocking speed, and some victims died within hours of the first symptoms. National Park Service records say disease was the #1 killer on the emigrant trails by a wide margin, and historians estimate that roughly 6 to 10% of emigrants died from illness. Crowded camps and rough settlements made the problem even worse, so the basic act of finding clean water could become a survival test. So, if you picture the Wild West as a place where danger wore a gun belt, the real picture is a lot less cinematic. A bucket of bad water could do more damage than a whole gang of outlaws.
And once sickness got into camp, the next problem showed up right away. Even if you found a doctor, there was no guarantee he could actually save you. Number 2. Weak medicine. The Old West was brutal partly because medicine was still limited and often far away. In the late 1800s, it was common in rural America to have only one physician serving a huge area, sometimes within 100 miles. That meant help could take hours or even longer to reach you, and that delay mattered. A cut on the hand, a bad fall, a broken bone, or an infected tooth could turn serious fast. Antiseptic surgery was only beginning to spread in the second half of the 19th century, and antibiotics were still decades away from common medical use. So, a wound that sounds minor today could become life-threatening on the frontier. That is one of the biggest things movies usually skip. A gunshot was dangerous, of course, but so was a kicked shin that got infected, or a hand sliced open while working with tools. Frontier doctors did what they could, but they were dealing with poor roads, limited supplies, and a medical system that had not yet caught up with the dangers of the land. On top of that, people often had to make do with whatever remedies and supplies were on hand. And that matters because the land itself kept throwing danger at you every single day, especially if your job put you around horses and cattle.
Number 3. Horses and cattle. Real cowboys were not spending every day in flashy shootouts. Most were doing hard, risky animal work, and that work could go bad in a second. Horses could throw you, kick you, drag you, or step wrong on rough ground and bring you down with them. Cattle were not much better. Longhorns were tough, unpredictable animals, and a stampede at night was one of the worst things a trail crew could face. One loud sound, one lightning strike, or one animal spooking at the wrong moment
could send an entire herd running. If your horse stumbled in front of that wave of moving cattle, you had almost no time to fix the situation. Historical accounts from cowboy country are very clear on this point. Cowboys could be killed or seriously injured by horses, cattle, firearms, and blizzards long before any famous outlaw came into the picture. That is the real Wild West job description. It demanded skill, stamina, and a lot of luck. And even if you stayed in the saddle, the trip itself was still trying to kill you. Because Western travel was rough, unstable, and full of small mistakes that turned deadly. Number 4. Wagon roads. Travel in the Old West was not just slow, it was dangerous in a very basic physical way. Wagons were top-heavy. Roads were often little more than rutted tracks, and a lot of people were exhausted before the day was even half over. The National Park Service has called the overland route the nation's longest graveyard, and says nearly 1 in 10 emigrants who set off on the main trails did not survive. According to National Park Service and Britannica summaries of the Oregon Trail, wagon accidents were among the most common killers on the journey. People fell off, slipped under wheels, got crushed during sharp turns, or were hurt handling draft animals like oxen, mules, and horses. Guns added another layer of risk because they were common tools and constant companions, which meant accidents happened around them too.
The image of a wagon train rolling smoothly across open land is mostly movie language. The real thing involved broken gear, rough crossings, steep slopes, fatigue, dust, and people making split-second choices with heavy vehicles they could not control perfectly. And there was one part of that travel that deserved its own level of fear, because once you reached moving water, all the problems multiplied. Number 5. River crossings. Rivers were one of the clearest reminders that the frontier did not care how prepared you felt. A trail could be manageable 1 hour and deadly the next, just because a crossing went wrong. Travelers used all kinds of methods to get wagons across water. Some caulked wagon boxes and floated them. Some raised the boxes on the axles. Some hitched multiple teams to one wagon and hoped at least one set of animals stayed on solid ground. Ropes were sometimes stretched across the river to guide swimming animals and drifting equipment. That tells you everything you need to know. These were not safe systems. They were improvised solutions for a problem people could not avoid. Britannica notes that accidental drownings were one of the recurring causes of death on the trail, and the National Park Service lists river crossings and drowning among the main killers. Cold water, hidden drop-offs, strong current, frightened animals, and overloaded wagons made every crossing a gamble. Even a successful crossing could leave your food soaked, your gun useless, your animals shaken, and your whole group behind schedule. It was the kind of danger that did not need a villain. The river itself was enough. And even if you made it to the other side, the weather waiting for you across the plains and mountains could be just as unforgiving. Number 6. Bad weather. The weather in the Old West could kill you in opposite ways depending on where you were standing. On the plains and in the dry West, heat, dust, and dehydration wore people down fast. National Park Service descriptions of trail conditions mention dust so fine it covered everything, dry air bad enough to split lips, and heat strong enough to shrink wood so much that wagon wheels had to be soaked in rivers at night to keep their iron rims from slipping off. Then the same world could hit you with hail, lightning, tornadoes, high winds, or a blizzard. That swing is what made frontier weather so dangerous. It was not just uncomfortable, it kept changing the rules. In places like Bodie, California,
Winter could turn severe enough to drop temperatures below zero by sundown, with snowdrifts towering far above a person. The town itself took its name from W.S. Bodie, who froze to death in a blizzard before he could enjoy the gold discovery tied to his name. Cowboys were also known to freeze in winter storms on the range. So yes, the Wild West had outlaws and lawmen, but the atmosphere was often the bigger threat. And when people chased fortune into the mountains, the danger got even worse underground. Number 7. Mining shafts. Gold and silver built the legend of the Old West, but mines were some of the deadliest workplaces in the region. The problem was not just a collapse, even though cave-ins were a real fear. Mines also had rotten ladders, unstable support timbers, deep vertical shafts, bad air, hidden water, misfired explosives, and toxic chemicals left behind from processing ore. National Park Service safety pages on abandoned mineral lands explain that deadly gases can collect in underground passages. Oxygen can drop without warning, and mines were only built to be safe while they were actively operating. Once ventilation stopped and timbers rotted, they became much more unstable. That tells you a lot about what miners were dealing with in the first place. They were working inside places that were dangerous even when maintained, and far worse after corners were cut or money ran short. Mining camps often grew fast around all that risk, which made daily life even harder above ground as well as below it. People went west dreaming about one lucky strike, but the actual routine of mining was dark, cramped, exhausting, and full of ways to die without ever seeing an outlaw. Then again, violence really was part of the West, too. It just did not always look the way Hollywood taught people to expect. Number 8. Gunfire. Gun violence in the Old West was real, but the movie version gets the details wrong. It was not usually a neat, quick-draw showdown at high noon between two evenly matched men in an empty street. Historians who study homicide in the 19th century West say the region was not as violent as movies suggest in day-to-day frequency, but homicide rates were still very high by modern standards in many Western communities. Ohio State data on Western homicide rates shows that adults in places like Dodge City faced a murder risk far above what most people would consider normal. And Smithsonian reporting notes that frontier towns with and without gun laws could both be violent, though towns without restrictions tended to be worse. That is why places like Dodge City enforced rules against carrying firearms in town. In Kansas's 5 largest cattle towns, historians counted 45 murders from 1870 to 1885, which sounds lower than Hollywood would make you think, but it was still serious violence concentrated in small populations. When shooting started, lawmen were in danger, outlaws were in danger, and regular people nearby were in danger too. And there is another myth worth dropping here. Popular stories often treat Native Americans as the main danger to white travelers, but Britannica cites historian John Unruh's conclusion that fewer than 400 emigrants were killed in Native attacks along the Oregon Trail between 1840 and 1860. Disease and accidents killed far more people, and both NPS and Britannica note that many Native communities traded with immigrants and helped them. So, if you had actually lived in the Old West, the thing that might have killed you fastest was not some legendary duel with an outlaw. It could have been a stray bullet in a crowded town, a street argument that suddenly turned armed, or an ordinary injury that the frontier had no good way to treat.